Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and I've got today's gonna be a good show. I'm excited about it. There's all kinds of things swirling around my brain, and there's we're in really confusing times, aren't we? So, I am going to cover. I'm going to talk about a story that I published yesterday about Patrick Byrne and his attorney Stephanie Lambert and some revelations that I had based on her recent legal filing in the Dominion versus Patrick Byrne lawsuit. And then we're going to get into, and Patrick Byrne responded and gave some, really fantastic new information. And so I'm going to share that. And then, and what that means. And then also I'm going to look at, there was a hearing in that case in March that has some related revelations that I just discovered this morning. So I'm going to share that with you. Then we're going to get into Kash Patel and the SEAL Team 6 thing. And even more interestingly to me, this demand letter, cease and desist demand letter, correction letter from Kash's attorney to Olivia of Troy's attorney. And when it's who those attorneys are that to me is fascinating because they are central to all the research that I've done. So, Krista, glad you're here, and we are gonna dive right in. So first, I'm gonna kind of go over the story that I published yesterday, and that is this right here. And the story is really that Stephanie Lambert, who has been working as Patrick Byrne's attorney since 2020, since really immediately after the election. She's a Michigan attorney. This is her right here. This is her mugshot from when she was arrested. And that whole story of her arrest is quite interesting. When she was indicted for on state charges of felony charges of tampering with election equipment. Her along with Matt DePerno. They're the two that were indicted. There were others that were involved and that actually had their hands on the equipment that were not indicted. Very similarly to Tina Peters' story, where Tina Peters is in prison right now, really for what Conan Hayes did. And and she's responsible for lying to the Secretary of State, breaking the rules, and all that kind of stuff. And that's she did all that. And and when she says that she did nothing wrong, that's just not true. She deliberately committed fraud and lied to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State's representatives created a false identity, or took one employee's identity, gave it to Conan Hayes, lied about Conan Hayes' identity, and Patrick Byrne has admitted that he was paying Conan Hayes to be there. Patrick Byrne has actually taken responsibility, I think, and I'm going to show you in a minute. But I think that Patrick Byrne has actually taken responsibility for setting up Tina Peters. So I'm going to share that in just a minute. So it's very similar here in Michigan with these criminal indictments. I wonder if they really meant to indict Stephanie Lambert, because all of these players, like Conan Hayes, the prosecution just seemed to have no interest in him at all. And there's a very similar player here in Michigan that was involved here in Michigan and in several other states, who was a member of Flynn's ASOG team. His name is Jim Penrose. Talked about him a little bit before. And he actually was one of the ones that he and Conan Hayes and Todd Sanders flew out on Patrick Byrne's jet to Antrim County the day after Matt DePerno got the only legal victory that there was in election integrity after the 2020 election, at least in the weeks and months after the election. And that victory that he got was he got a court order to do discovery on the machines. And so within hours of him getting that, Mike Flynn himself had Matt DePerno on the phone. Matt had never spoken with Flynn before that. And hang on a second here. Oops. I don't even know what just happened. All right. So I had so Matt had never spoken with Flynn before that. And um all of a sudden Patrick Byrne's private jet is landing in Antrim County with Jim Penrose and Conan Hayes and Todd Sanders, and Stephanie Lambert was instantly inserted into all that and was trying to kind of, from what I understand, was trying to take over his case. And it turns out, as I was sharing here, she just admitted in this legal filing that was filed 2 weeks ago in the Dominion versus Patrick Byrne lawsuit. Now, Dominion is they've sued several different people, including Lindell, OAN, Newsmax. They sued Fox News. Fox News settled for like $800 million. They're suing Patrick Byrne for $1.6 billion. And do I think that that's just? No, I don't. Do I hope he loses his lawsuit? I don't care one way or the other. I don't. I definitely think that we should err, especially being a journalist. I think that we should err on the side of free speech and the ability to say what we believe is true, even if it's not true. And I think that there is, I think especially when it comes to the freedom of the press, I think that there is a lot of lawfare that's engaged. That the part of the reason why we have a crisis in our media landscape, which we absolutely have a crisis in our media landscape of quality and unbiased reporting. It just doesn't exist. And part of the reason is because good reporters get sued for reporting on things that people don't like. And so they threaten them with lawsuits, they engage in lawfare. And that's part of what this story is really all about. So, anyways, we got Stephanie Lambert admitting, she says in this filing that just 2 weeks ago, she says that she was the opposing attorney prosecuting many civil matters and working on behalf of law enforcement in Michigan. And so I got her cell phone number, and I texted her yesterday and asked her what law enforcement, because it doesn't say. And she's never, and she says when the attorney general weaponized her office, that's the Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. And she's saying, this is Stephanie Lambert's writing here. She said she weaponized her office. Dana Nessel weaponized her office, pierced attorney-client privilege on her files, and used the Michigan Director of Elections along with special prosecutor to obtain indictment against Ms. Lambert. And so both Lambert and DePerno were indicted there. And they actually indicted the Attorney General, Dana Nessel, indicted Matt DePerno while he was running against her, during the campaign season in the run-up to the election. She indicted Matt DePerno, indicted her political opponent. And this is communist level stuff. It's pretty terrible. But here we are. And of course, Jim Penrose, Conan Hayes, Todd Sanders, who had their hands in the machines. As far as that, they were not indicted. I don't know that the prosecution has had any interest in them at all. And Byrne's attorneys that were supposedly representing Tina Peters in her trial, claimed repeatedly that Conan Hayes was working on behalf of law enforcement, and Tina Peters repeatedly said that he was an informant, a government informant high up in the government. And we've seen Patrick Byrne has been admitting that. I want to share this little video right here of even Flynn knows that Patrick Byrne has been a Fed, and not, and Patrick Byrne has admitted to taking orders, like in this video here. He admits that he took orders from Comey and or McCabe and Strzok, and within the FBI. But here's Flynn actually saying that that Byrne has worked for the national security state to do things on behalf of the U.S. government, and he actually says that
here in just a few
Oops, hang on.
seconds, and we're going to talk about some of the.
My audio is messed up. Hang on just a second.
Here in just a few seconds, and we're going to talk about some of the other touch points that brought us together, but also I think impacted Patrick in a way that caused him to be asked more often by our government elements inside of our national security state to do things on behalf of the U.S. government. And
so asked by the national security state to do things on behalf of the U.S. government. And he knows this. He knew this all along, Flynn did. And I believe that he also was in the same boat. And so, they're desperate when they're actually admitting this. And there's a spy term called limited hangout. And I used to think, a lot of people think, I used to think this too, that a limited hangout is like kind of an exclusive kind of club, or like a where a select group are able to hang out. And it's obvious, it's often used in that way. But the way that spies use that word is that it is a tactic for when you're about to get found out, that some really damning information is about to come out against you. You hang out a limited portion of that information and you claim that that's the whole information. I think that's a really, really critical understanding, because so you dangle out a little bit of a small piece of that, you hang out a small piece of that information out, you get it out early before the big damning information comes out. You claim that that's the whole story, and that will has an inoculating effect on the public. And it causes them to think, okay, well, you already admitted to it. It's already, when what you admitted to is not that bad. So, what's the big deal? And it is extremely effective. I mean, it sounds like it's just this bogus, manipulative thing, but it is extremely effective. And I think that that's exactly what they are doing here, because Patrick Byrne wouldn't go out and put out a book and a movie chronicling his exploits of being a Fed and claiming that he's, like a James Bond 007 kind of guy, if some really much bigger revelations weren't about to come out. And so here we have Flynn and Byrne admitting that Byrne has been asked by the national security state to do things on behalf of the U.S. government. Flynn's own words. Okay. Now let me share another filing by Stephanie Lambert. Actually, let me tell the story as I understand it about her arrest in this photo, because I think this is interesting. She went to Washington, D.C., and there was a bench warrant put out for her arrest, because after her indictment, you're supposed to get fingerprinted and whatever. You're supposed to go in and get that done. And it's, it's just something you just go into the jail and you do it, whatever. But she didn't do it. 9 months later, she still didn't do it. And because of that, they put out a bench warrant for her arrest. She was in Washington, D.C. for a hearing. And normally the marshals would just arrest her right there. There's a bench warrant out for her arrest. And they didn't do it. They let her just go and get on an airplane, fly back to Detroit, and then they arrested her when she got back in Detroit. But I mean, normally the U.S. Marshals would actually arrest her, and they would, she's out of state in a courtroom, and they would take her back in a secure manner, as a prisoner, basically back to the state where there's a bench warrant out for her arrest. But they just let her fly on her own. It's very strange. So, and maybe there's more to that story that I don't know, but there's a lot of just strange and atypical kinds of things that have happened in this case. So let me pull up this real quick here. haven't shared a PDF on this, so let me figure out how to do that. Bear with me for just a minute. I tried this before. I thought it was simple. Oh, I found it. Okay. All right. Let me just make sure I got this right. Yes. Okay. So this right here this is something else. Um, this says United States District Court for the District of Columbia. This is a transcript for a hearing in with Dominion's attorneys and the judge and all of the different defendants. So you got My Pillow, you've got Patrick Byrne, you've got Herring Networks, you've got Sidney Powell. So with all of these, and Mike Lindell, you got the list of all of these attorneys that are there. So these are all present, and this is so this is the transcript of the whole hearing. And for most of it here, I'm going to share just a few kind of key moments here. So page, and you can find this in the court record. The case number and everything is right here. The civil action number. It's March 18th of this year. So page 23, I think, is where I'm going to start. What they're talking about is that Stephanie Lambert took the discovery, which under Byrne's previous attorney, before he had Stephanie Lambert on this case, the previous attorney agreed, both counsels agreed, and the judge marked all of the discovery from Dominion, all of the documents, there are thousands of pages of documents apparently, marked them all confidential, attorney's eyes only. And according to this hearing and what the judge said and what Stephanie Lambert said, she got the documents over the holidays in 2023. So in December 2023. And then in January, she didn't really look at them until January, February. And then in March, she gave everything she had, gave access to it all to Dar Leaf. And like I mentioned, Patrick Byrne responded on X, said that it was Dar Leaf, and he says, "What's the problem with that?" Well, part of the problem is that Dar Leaf is the sheriff of Barry County, and none of this has anything to do with Barry County. I mean, they do have Dominion machines there, but there's Dominion machines just about everywhere. What jurisdiction does he have there to be investigating this? And surely, I mean, he can be if he believes that there's a crime being committed in his county. As the sheriff, he has full legal constitutional authority to investigate that. But why would Stephanie Lambert have been deputized by the sheriff of Barry County for something that was happening in Antrim County? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, and part of the reason why Ivan Raiklin has spoken so fondly of Dar Leaf is that Dar Leaf has demonstrated a willingness to deputize citizens for just about anything. And I mean you want to deputize. It's up to the sheriff to staff their police force in whatever way they believe is best. But and it's not terribly uncommon historically for a sheriff to deputize citizens, but usually that's done for a specific cause that the citizens are well suited to do, like doing traffic at a major event, or bagging up sandbags, or doing emergency services, or being prepared for helping in various emergencies or something. But I mean, you want staff that's actually trained in law enforcement. You don't want to get sued for engaging in law enforcement illegally, and that's very easily what happens when citizens engage in it. And that's exactly, in my opinion, why Ivan Raiklin wanted citizens engaged in these live stream swatting raids, because what could go wrong? Everything could go wrong. Okay, so with that little background right there, we've got Stephanie Lambert gave all of this to all of this discovery that was marked confidential to Darleaf without talking about the judge first. And the judge, understandably, is rather upset about this. And the judge was saying, you've had this for 3 months, and and you had it for 2 months before you even gave it to Darleaf, and you never even asked me as the judge. I mean, I had marked this confidential. You never even asked the court. What's going on? Square this for me. So, so here she says, the judge is saying, who did you give it to? She says, I've given it to the sheriff's department, and it's under review through Mr. Byrne by the United States Attorney's Office. The court says, I need names. And she says, Stephanie says, Sheriff Darleaf. And when did you give that information to Sheriff Darleaf? And, on and on. So it ends up that, she said this month, just within weeks. So it ends up becoming a really big issue, which is understandable. And she was eventually barred by the court from being Byrne's attorney, because the court viewed this as such a grave violation of the court's order and decorum. And I don't think that that's an unjust ruling. She broke the law. And so as we go on here, there's a little more. And she's talking about, the court's trying to figure out how many pages of documents, how many documents have been leaked, where are they, who else has copies, who else has access, just huge mess. Okay. So I want to go to, there is, as we go ahead here, they're on, I could have been better prepared. I apologize. Okay, here we go. So page 44. Court says, you gave the documents to the sheriff, did you not? And Stephanie Lambert replies, and he had an open investigation, and he responded with an affidavit saying he was going to seek to quash the subpoena in a large extent. So, Your Honor, the sheriff's office, the appropriate chain of custody, the best chain of custody would be to obtain the documents from my login. So she gave her login. The way that all of this discovery was on a third-party system that you log into so that you have access to it. So it's like a server access kind of thing. And she gave her login without asking the court's permission to Darleaf. And there's no knowledge of were there other citizens that were deputized by Darleaf that he gave that access to as well? Did they give access to, there were stories that were run about it in the Gateway Pundit, and Darleaf and the Gateway Pundit and Jim Hoff are pretty close. It's a mess. And I don't think that it's unreasonable necessarily. I mean, it's not, it's up to the judge. I don't think it's an unreasonable request for Dominion to say, hey, let's litigate this in the courtroom, not in the court of public opinion. And the judge had agreed with that. And so that's the court's order, and you got to go with the court's order. So here we go. So she goes on. This is the money quote right here. I was giving and I find it very ironic that Dominion sued the National Intelligence Asset and is complaining about a breach when he's turned in evidence of national security breaches done by Dominion. So she just talked about her client, Patrick Byrne, as a national intelligence asset. All right. I mean, he's a national. I mean, she wouldn't describe him as a national. I mean, she might say, he's a law enforcement. He's working on behalf of law enforcement, which is the language that she used to describe herself. So, and he's admitted to having worked for the FBI. Now she's saying that he's a national intelligence asset. So that would mean that he's an asset of what? The CIA, DHS. What should the intelligence, the National Security Administration, which intelligence agency is Patrick Byrne working for? His attorney just said under oath, and she's risking disbarment by being untruthful. She just said under oath in court that Patrick Byrne is a national intelligence asset. Okay, let's skip ahead to the very end. All of this back and forth. The other attorneys had to say different things. At the very end, the judge says, "I'd like to just clear the courtroom, please, as soon as practicable. Except I have one unrelated matter with Ms. Lambert. If you could hang back, thank you." And so she cleared the court, and she had Stephanie Lambert stay to discuss an unrelated matter. Now, that unrelated matter, to me, I mean, so what is this that is not, that's closed off the record between the judge and Stephanie Lambert? What is it that they discussed? I think this is a bombshell. I think this is a big deal. We can really kind of only speculate, but I think we can draw reasoned conclusions based on what she just said in the courtroom about Patrick Byrne being a national intelligence asset. And if I were the judge, I'd want to hear about that too. What agency? What is the nature of this? What is going on here? Very, very interesting. So, and I've been asked, what does this matter? Why, why are you making a big deal of this? Well, I think that in order to unwind all of the psyops that we've been hit with, that we've just been bombarded with by the left and by our own side, by the Flynn Network, we have to know who's working for who. The CIA is legally barred from operating and doing operations in this country against Americans. Is Patrick Byrne working for the CIA? And throughout the Flynn Network, there's all kinds of operatives who are retired CIA. There's tons of them. You got Michael Jaco, Basil Baz. There's Robert David Steele, who may or may not have died, claims that he did. Nino claims that he did. There's a lot of others that officially used to be part of the CIA. They're all part of the Flynn Network. And Shelby Bush on a recorded phone call with me, and Shelby Bush runs the Maricopa County Republican Committee, and she's been the subject of much of my reporting within the Arizona Republican Party. And she admitted that she worked with CIA, that it was her military intelligence connections back in 2015 or 16 that led her to meet Kevin Shipp from the CIA, and that they worked together on the Kill Chain documentary, which was published. It wasn't released until 2020, early 2020, before the election. And Sidney Powell referred to that constantly after the election. She referred very frequently to Kill Chain, saying, look, even the Democrats are talking about, because it was produced by HBO. All of the people in it it was like Amy Klobuchar and other Democrats. It was really a bunch of Democrats that were doing this. So, why was Shelby Bush working with Kevin Shipp, who often is aligned with the Flynn Network and has done many different events with Flynn, speaking events. And he is retired CIA. Why it's just so many questions. And she said that they were working on that for a couple years and they're now nowhere in the credits. There's just so many questions. So there's clearly some CIA connections within, people that are overtly former CIA, but are there confidential CIA assets, human sources within the Flynn Network that we don't know about? Is that what Byrne is? I don't know. So would like to see that. I have a lot of questions, and I'm going to reach out to Stephanie again. I'm hoping that she will answer some of these questions because these don't. She said when I asked her yesterday, she said that she's unable to talk about the Dominion lawsuit at this time, and I think that these questions really aren't so much about the Dominion lawsuit, and they're about her own work on behalf of law enforcement. And so is this story that Patrick Byrne put out about her working for Darleaf, is that too a limited hangout? Was she working for more than one agency? Stephanie Lambert and Jim Penrose, and this is another thing that I think most people don't know, but I've heard this from a couple different sources that told me that Stephanie Lambert and Jim Penrose, they had an affair. They were sleeping together for from late 2020 through 21. And so, why is it that Jim Penrose was never indicted? He did the same thing. Why was he never indicted? I don't know. It's probably the same answer that, the answer would probably be the same for why Conan Hayes was never indicted or questioned. And the prosecution in Colorado and Tina Peters' trial never even called him to the stand. You would think that they would want him, or the defense, that somebody would want to talk to him, that he would probably be valuable to one side or the other. No curiosity. It's odd, isn't it? Krista says a little truth for a huge lie. And then they hit people with we already went over it. Exactly. That is a limited hangover. They say, yeah, we already went over this. We've already litigated this in the court of public opinion. Yeah, I already admitted I came clean. Yeah, there's nothing there. And that is what the limited hangout is. So I think that this is a big and developing story. I think that there's a lot more to it. And I also think that this relates to Kash Patel because we need, whether, there's a lot of people that think that we don't need the FBI and that it was created under bad pretenses, and maybe it was. But I think that especially in this day and age, I think the Constitution itself even calls for a national police force that would that would police, intrastate situations or, interstate crimes and or crimes that are committed in multiple states or between states. In the absence of the FBI, it used to be that, back in the day, the mobsters, gangsters could cross state lines and evade law enforcement and be free. So as soon as they got out of the state, then the state police, the local police, the sheriffs, they had no more jurisdiction. They couldn't go into another state to make an arrest. And so there is definite use to the public in there being a national police force. And especially in this day and age, especially today, we need, with cybercrime, with organized crime, and with a rogue government bureaucracy that has been turned against us, that is not necessarily even partisan. There are people within this rogue police state who speak leftist language and they speak MAGAese and they sound just like us and they speak to us and they're among us and they are spreading lies and psyops. And, that is, that's exactly the purpose of the show, is to investigate that. because it's something that's just not investigated enough. On the left, when they do look at it, when they do look at Flynn, for example, on the left, they tie it to Trump. They tie it to all the rest of us. They say this is what all MAGA is, but it's not. It's not. They don't represent us. They're working against us. They're working against Trump. So let's talk about Kash Patel. I am thinking more and more, and largely because of, let me find it. I had it open, but I think I accidentally closed it. Largely because of this post. Give me just a moment. I have so many tabs open. It's just nuts. My brain is crazy. Okay. I'm almost there. Someday I'll have when I make it big time, I'll have a producer. Here we go. Okay. So this right here is what concerns me. And this is a post, Olivia of Troy. Her claim to fame, and she milks it for all she's worth, is she was a staffer for Pence when he was VP. And so she is therefore a Republican expert. She represents the right, apparently, on MSNBC. And so she went on a few days ago, I think on Monday or Tuesday this week, on MSNBC, and she was saying that that she didn't think that Kash Patel was fit to be the FBI director, and that, according to this letter, made several false and defamatory statements about Mr. Patel. These comments include that Mr. Patel would lie about intelligence, would lie about making things up on operations, to the point where Mr. Patel put the lives of Navy SEALs at risk when it came to Nigeria. And so what was most concerning about this to me is, and there's several things, but one is that this comes from Banal Law Group. Jesse Banal is Flynn's litigation attorney. And Jesse Banal is, he's been described to me as just kind of a pit bull, and this letter really kind of shows it. He's, they're just trying to bully her into submission. Now she's working as a journalist. She was stating her opinion. These are things that are completely protected under the First Amendment. And she's also repeating things that have been reported and that are in the public sphere. So it's not like she was saying anything that was, that she was representing anything that was knowingly false. She was talking about other reporting. There was a report, I read it this morning in the Atlantic magazine that was published a couple months ago about Kash Patel. And it's a good read, actually. I mean, it's, there's biased language in it, but I think, as to be a statesman, we need to be able to read a report from different perspectives, to see through and to ignore the biased language, and to be able to discern, okay, what part of this reporting is true and what part might not be true. And we have to weigh the evidence for ourselves. So we need to be able to read a report, even if it's written by a leftist and it's called, they call us, election deniers or whatever it is that they want to call us, far right, whatever. You just read through that, ignore that, and look to the evidence. What evidence is actually being presented? Because often, as they're doing this investigative work, they are uncovering valuable evidence. So in that, they talk about SEAL Team 6 and what happened in Nigeria in 2016. I think it was right before it was either right before the election or right before the inauguration. I think it was right before the election, 2016. At that time, Kash Patel was working for he was a special counsel to Obama's Department of Justice. And he was also a liaison to the Joint Special Operations Group, or JSOC, Joint Special Operations. And so, and in that capacity, there's the story that is being told that involves Kash Patel, Mike Pompeo, Mark Esper, and others, Esper and others, and SEAL Team 6. There was an American citizen that was being held hostage in Nigeria, and they put together a plan to have SEAL Team 6 drop in 3 miles from where he was being held hostage, and then they would hike in and rescue him. But they had to fly over Nigerian airspace to do that. And according to the reports, and this is multiple eyewitnesses that are claiming this, Kash Patel said that they had permission to enter Nigerian airspace. And so they went ahead with the mission. They green lighted it, and they were in the air. The SEAL Team 6 was in the air when they went to confirm that there was permission to fly through Nigerian airspace, and they found out that nobody had that permission. So if Kash Patel did in fact say that, he was not being truthful, and we don't know why. And it's, a group of people's word against Kash Patel's word. There's nobody else that I've seen, no other witnesses that have come up to say, no, Kash is right, he didn't actually say that. But apparently what happened is the plane with SEAL Team 6 on it had to circle around off the coast of Africa for an hour while they were trying to get permission to enter Nigerian airspace. They did end up getting it. The mission ended up being successful. And the quote from Kash Patel was, well, nobody was hurt, so what the F is the problem, or something like that. And so, I don't know if that is what really happened, but according to this report in the Atlantic magazine, it's actually where, the reporter had interviewed many different sources from all points, all throughout Kash Patel's career. And it's actually consistent with what other sources have said about, that worked with him even early on in his career when he was a public defendant in Miami. And then when he was in New York, when he was working with the government, and and then when he was working under in the Obama's DOJ. So there's a lot of questions about what specifically he was doing within Obama's DOJ. And I'm very, very curious why Devin Nunes chose him to be his to run this investigation on behalf of the House Intelligence Committee. So very, very curious. And this is something that I'm looking into a lot more. I want to believe what Jeff and Shannon at the MG show have said, that, and their belief that Kash is basically a double agent for Trump and that he's not working with Flynn. But I mean, if he's working with Flynn's attorney, and Flynn's attorney is his go-to, and he's engaged in this this is kind of a tyrannical lawfare against a journalist. I mean, it doesn't matter if this journalist is on the left or the right. Yeah, this is somebody that wants to be the FBI director. I mean, he's going to have, if he's confirmed, he's going to have all kinds of criticism. Is he going to engage in lawfare against everybody that criticizes him? Or worse, is he going to use the power of government against them? I mean, that would make the left right in their claims that Trump is going to be a tyrant. And I think that is, I don't know. I don't think that this is right. And so and everything that he's doing here screams that. Now, there's a huge, crazy thing about this story that's just like is it just a coincidence? So who is Olivia's attorney? And this is where it just gets nuts. It's Mark Zaid. Mark Zaid, I talked about in my Tulsa presentation. Mark Zaid was the architect of the impeachment, the Ukraine impeachment. He represented the whistleblower in the impeachment, who I don't believe, by the way, was Eric Ciaramella. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I don't believe that it was Eric Ciaramella, but he was representing the mysterious anonymous whistleblower. And he also has gone to, he's friends with Mike Ledeen. He's gone to synagogue with him for a long time and close friends with Mike Ledeen. Mike Flynn is exceptionally close friends with Mike Ledeen, like really, really close friends, lifelong friends with Mike Ledeen. So much so that they wrote a book together during Trump's 2016 campaign while Flynn was working on his campaign. They authored a book together. And Mike Ledeen was the first person that Mike Flynn called after he got a text message on his iPhone from Ambassador Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, which is kind of what led to him getting fired and, lying to the Pence and the FBI and all of that. So Flynn, close friends with Mike Ledeen, who's close friends with Mark Zaid. And Mark Zaid, just a few weeks after Flynn started working for Trump's campaign, Mark Zaid posted on Facebook, and I don't have that picture handy. I'm sorry. I need a producer. Please donate or join my Substack to help me get to the place where I can actually afford a producer and afford to grow. biggertruthmedia.com. But there was in March of 2016, Mark Zaid posted on Facebook that he had a dream, that his dream scenario, and this is somebody that's very much on the left, and I'll show you some tweets from him in a minute, but he's very much on the left and very concerned, very, very concerned about what Trump is going to do, because he is part of the deep state. He's a spy attorney. He's close to it all. And so there's just a lot of concern on Mark Zaid's part about what's going to happen in Trump's presidency. And so that's part of the reason why I think he's representing this Olivia woman, and that she's out there speaking out against Kash. I think that there is a lot of concern. And like I said on Monday when I was talking about Kash, I think that he is likely to follow through. If he is the FBI director, he's likely to follow through against the people that he talks about. The problem that I have, in addition to him demonstrating a willingness to engage in lawfare against anybody that disagrees with him or criticizes him, is that he's going to, just like in his book, he's going to very conveniently leave out of his investigation a lot of people. And those people are the people that have been running psyops against our side, including Flynn, Byrne, the Stephanie Lamberts, the Jim Penroses, all of those people. And I think that's a really big problem. So let's get caught up. We got some comments. Liberty says you should get a hold of Shannon Joy on Rumble. She was talking about Kash and others. Yeah, she's welcome to reach out to me. I can look for her. Shadow Cypher says, I think Kash is a good choice. It's Tulsi Gabbard I don't like. I wouldn't mind her being in a different role, but not DNI. I agree with you on Tulsi. I think, I've looked into Trevor Loudon's reporting on her, and I like Trevor Loudon quite a bit. I followed him for several years, and there's a lot of, she has a lot of pretty deep connections with known communists. And, she says that she has turned away from that, but just in my study of history and people who have spent years and years working with the Communist Party, they can be very eager to make it appear as if they have turned away from the Communist Party, just like Comey and Clapper and all of these people that had backgrounds, and during their confirmation hearings, they said, no, I used to be, I think Comey said, I used to be a part of the Communist Party USA, but I'm not anymore. I turned away from that. Right. Right. Yeah. So, from what I understand, Mark Esper, or whatever his name is, by his own reporting, stated the mission was a success. Yeah, it was a success. But it was also very close to not being a success. And um, the reason for that, reportedly, according to the reports, and this is according to every account except for Kash Patel's account, says that the reason why it was almost a failure, in fact, I mean, it put the lives of SEAL Team 6 and the American hostage at risk, because because Kash Patel made an untrue statement, according to these people who were there, about having that permission to fly over Nigerian airspace. And Liberty says, it seems these guys are always either writing a book or making a documentary. Yes, it is true. So yeah, so I'll definitely look into Shannon's show. If you know her, put in a good word for me. She's got a show. Yeah, I'd be happy to go on anybody's show and engage in these, working through these ideas. So a couple other things from X that I want to share here. Yeah, just a second. Okay. I also so Zaid, this is just this is just a confusing thing that we've got Mark Zaid on one side and Jesse Banal on the other side. And I have heard rumors that that Mark Zaid is working with someone on behalf of somebody on a lawsuit against Flynn. And so this might not be the only time that we see Zaid and Banal on separate sides. That doesn't mean that they're enemies with each other. It just means that their clients are fighting each other. It could be like, as a real estate broker, I've been on the other side of negotiations with people that, I've been, come to be friends with through the profession. And so it's probably the same with attorneys, where they know each other, they're colleagues, they work together, and they even have a lot of history together. And yet they are representing their clients and their fiduciaries to their clients, or at least in theory. So Mike Ledeen, by the way, this connection point between Zaid and Flynn, Mike Ledeen was also involved in Iran Contra. And that's something that I plan to explore in a lot more depth, these connections to Iran Contra. It's all, in the end, everything about all of these psyops it's just confusing. I wish I could just tie it up in a neat little bow and say, oh yeah, it's all just neat and tidy, but it's not. So, sorry. So this is Mark Zaid, and he posted, I want to just share his post. Okay. So he and what he said here, he says Trump nominated FBI Director Kash Patel is thin-skinned. And I actually described him the same way. I mean, that his lawyers just sent me a letter threatening to sue my client, Olivia of Troy, regarding perceived criticism, far tamer than many others have publicly said. Why her? And that's an interesting question. I mean, there are a lot of people that are criticizing Kash Patel. So why is he setting this and being all threatening, saying preserve your documents? We're going to court. Apologize, correct the record. I'm not sure that she even said anything that was factually false. So anyway, so then he says signals what is about to begin January 20th. Lawfare, hashtag lawfare, hashtag retaliation, hashtag chaos. So is on the left. You know, that's what they do. So there are a couple more questions. Aaron's Rod says it's tempting to want to get revenge on the Dems, but the best type of justice is blind justice, and it's better for all citizens for the FBI to be unbiased. And that's I really completely agree with that. Well, I think what we really want is we don't want an FBI that's going to go in and go after retribution. I mean, that sets an even stronger precedent. And, you know, then that gives the Democrats, you know, next time they're in power to say, oh, look, you know, we're just doing what the Republicans did. You have no right to complain. And I think we do need an FBI. We do need a national police force. We just need one that is smaller, that is transparent, that does not operate against and set up Americans like it appears has been done so many times. You know, like was done with the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. We need an FBI that is rational and blind. We want blind justice. I think that as Americans, that's really, really what we should want is blind justice. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Shadow Cypher says, from what I understood, Obama went after Flynn to keep him from helping Trump. He was completely cleared of all his charges, including lying to the FBI when City Powell got the exculpatory. And so that this, I think you're talking about the statement that Obama made, which was the most effective thing, and even to this day, in many people's minds, that is why they continue to justify their belief that Flynn is a good guy, because Obama went after him. Obama criticized him. He said that he was like the most dangerous person in the intelligence community or something. Do not work with Flynn. And that gave Flynn instant street cred on our side. And I have been talking about this and documenting it for some time, how, you know, Flynn was a lifelong Democrat. He didn't go to the Republican Party until 2021 as part of the whole precinct strategy effort to take over and infiltrate and take over, invade and take over, were the words of Dan Schultz. The state Republican Party is at the precinct level. And that's when he became a Republican, so that he could help to take over Sarasota County in Florida. And but when he was Obama's DIA director from 2012 to 2014, in 2013, he really began what appears to be a very deliberate campaign of actions to absorb upon himself the stain of Putin and the stain of Russia, which was it was all a very orchestrated, and it was really pretend. I think, you know, the Democrats clearly wanted to try to make Russia into the big bad boogeyman. Primarily, I think, because they never went along with NATO. And so for the Democrats, Russia was always the big bad enemy, the big bad boogeyman. And so Flynn took on the stain of Putin by going into the GRU against the wishes of the rest of the intelligence community, which is the GRU is Russia's CIA. And then he had multiple meetings. In 2015, he went to Russia twice. He was paid by the Office of Net Assessments. I think it was like $40,000 to go in the summer of 2020 or 2015 to Russia. And then that set up this meeting where he was paid by Russia Today, which was a state-owned newspaper in Russia, to go back and speak at another event in December of 15, just 2 months before he joined Trump's campaign. And I believe that the investigation into Flynn by the FBI started really as soon as he started working for Trump's campaign. And it's up for debate at what point Flynn actually knew that he was under investigation by the FBI, but he definitely knew by November of 2016. And he didn't tell Trump until January of 2017, after Trump had already decided to make him the national security advisor. Would Trump have made Flynn the national security advisor had he known in advance that Flynn was under FBI investigation? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt it. And yet he did. He set up the meetings with Don Jr. and Flynn helped to set up the meetings with Don Jr. and Jared Kushner with Russian businessmen. From what I understand, he discouraged them from bringing counsel attorneys to those meetings. He said, "Oh, it's just an informal meeting. They just want to get to know you." And then they ended up offering quid pro quos, which they fortunately denied. They rejected. But that was a form of entrapment, in my opinion. And so, and there's a lot there with Flynn. The FBI's code name for Flynn during Crossfire Hurricane was Crossfire Razor. And most of the connections between the Trump administration and Flynn and Russia came through Flynn, came through Crossfire Razor. So I've covered that quite a bit. And I know, but it's still valuable to examine because, this is still, it's new to a lot of people. And so I completely get. Patrick says Flynn and the network was the deep state insurance policy. And that is an interesting theory. And I would probably agree with that. So that's when Peter Strzok said, we have an insurance policy. I think that Flynn was part of that. And even the plan and what Flynn and his network did after the 2020 election, I think was very pre-coordinated and pre-orchestrated and planned, even back to 2016, I believe. Barry's comment, "Don't trust Flynn," was the start of the PSYOP. Yep, I agree with you, Patrick. But I think it actually started when Flynn was still the DIA director under Obama. A couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. Shadow Cypher says, "Yeah, but the FBI went after Flynn. He had to ditch his first set of lawyers, which is when he hired Powell." So there's some, that's partial true and partially untrue. So did the FBI go after Flynn? And was that just a stage? Q says it was a rubber bullet. I'm not into Q, but I think that is one way of looking at that. He never really lost anything. Flynn did agree, he signed a guilty plea in court. He chose the attorneys that he had. And they were left, they were attorneys that were very much on the left. That was his decision. And I think they were with Perkins Coie. It's his decision to choose the lawyers that he chose. Nobody else chose them for him. Even sat next to Putin, unaware that he was going, that he was going to be beforehand. I'm not sure that he was unaware that he was going to be sitting with Putin beforehand. I'm not sure about that. An interesting thing too, that I've been looking into. So I have an FBI document where they refer to Flynn as Crossfire Razor. So, I think that is not an accurate statement. You say, I thought Crossfire Razor was an operation name prior to it being called Crossfire Hurricane. I don't think that is accurate. And I totally disagree with you. I've been researching all this for 6 years now. Okay, that's fine. You're welcome to disagree. Trump offered him a pardon. He turned it down, hired Powell, and replaced those attorneys, and he helped him beat the case. Okay. She helped him beat the case. If she helped him beat the case, then why did he still need Trump's pardon? It's on my Substack. So I have it on my Substack. There's a report on Flynn. It's in the archives. But I'll publish it on my X here soon. I will do that. I want to thank you all for joining. So we covered quite a bit of ground. I think the end result is that we are, we're there are so many different psyops coming together. We've talked about, and I think if you haven't seen yesterday's show with Megan Walsh, I think that was extremely valuable. Where she talked about how she was gatekept by the Flynn Network. Her story was they prevented her from getting her story out to a wider audience. There were insinuations and offers of help. There was help given by someone who was close to Juan Savin, an attorney that was apparently very close to Juan Savin, that she said was into drugs and alcohol and even deliberately sabotaged her case and made it harder for her to keep her children and easier for her children to be taken away from her by the court. Tragic story. And it's not the only story that I've heard like that from the Flynn Network. And that's often what happens is they go after, they raise money on a cause like election integrity. They raise money on, they say they're going to fix it. They file lawsuits that I believe are deliberately bad lawsuits that ultimately discredit the entire election integrity movement. And that's a big part of what they're trying to do. They derail, they mislead, they lead off a cliff, and they make as much money as they possibly can in the meantime, using victim narratives and all this kind of stuff. And Kash has really operated in a very similar way as far as his, the way that he's grifted and raised money on interesting pretenses. I fully disagree with his, just 100% disagree with his characterization of Flynn in his book, Government Gangsters. I think that there are government gangsters that appear to be on the right, that were very much involved even in the whole Russia thing. And I think that the story that Dan Bongino puts out and the story that I think his sources were really Kash and Flynn and Sidney Powell. And that is a narrative that was deliberately crafted to contradict and counter the narrative from the left, which was that Trump was a Russian asset. And so then we have this narrative from the right, which is it's the leftist deep state that wants to take out Trump, and that that it was Spygate. And, clearly they did a lot wrong. However, I think that there are some distortions in that whole thing. It was a deliberate psyop to turn us all against each other, to cause us all to try to hate each other more. And it was very effective. And there are a lot of people on the right, and Flynn was one of them, that was very much involved in trying to set up Trump. And I think that they've been written out of history. And so I am working very actively on trying to get some documents unsealed and unredacted that could help to really shed a light on this. And I will continue to work on it. This is all a developing, evolving story, and there's much more. There's much more to this story about Stephanie Lambert and Byrne, and there's much more to the story of who are the government informants that are within the Flynn Network, who are and what agencies are they working for. And this is stuff this is really important for us to know and uncover. And so I'm going to keep working on this. I know many of you are working on this as well. And I think that one thing that should be able to unite us is I think we're crying out for justice. There has been so much injustice, and we need justice. And I think that the justice that we should be demanding and focusing on and desiring is slow, deliberate, careful justice, blind justice. I think that's really what we want. And that is the only justice that is sustainable long term as a society. And that's what I pray for, and that's what I hope that we can get. And I strongly believe that the whole approach of burning down the FBI is the wrong approach. And I think we need reform. I mean, clearly it's gone rogue. It's been engaged in political persecution. That's terrible. It needs to stop. The people that have done that need to be brought to justice. However, I think that we still need an FBI to investigate these very things and to investigate these crimes and bring these people to justice. We just need a blind, just like Aaron Gerard said. Patrick, 8 years now, the Patriots need justice, not psyops. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so there's so many psyops. And one of those psyops is this whole like monolithic view that we've got to accept Kash Patel. And I just that when anything that's being promoted, any narrative that's being promoted by the Flynn Network, I think it's wise to not just accept it as being true, and to look at it critically and skeptically, as a skeptic, and see what's really going on there. Trump is a finance guy and knew it would hurt our economy to lock it down. I think you're talking about locking down the economy. Yeah, there's so much there. Yeah, and this is a good point, Shadow Cypher. You say he did, but he was trying to make decisions that were political as a non-political kind of guy. And I think you're talking about in 2016, 17. He had 2 months in politics basically before getting elected as president. Yes. And he's admitted to having made mistakes, and he delegated the responsibility to people who are very much connected, especially with the Kochs, and that wanted to destroy him. And they rejected the populist movement that had put him in office. And so, what's different now is that I think, for one, I think Trump, he's acknowledged that he made some mistakes. And does that mean he's not making mistakes anymore? No, I think he still is. But one thing that I think is actually good is that he has made these nominations so early and given time as a result of that for the public to vet them. And so, yeah. And like you said, yeah, I agree. Gabbard is a huge one. I think Sebastian Gorka is a big mistake. I think Tom Homan is very close to. He was actually a director of the America Project, even though I like the things that he says about the border, and maybe he'll do a good job there. I hope he does. I truly do. And it's my view that there are a lot of people around the Flynn Network that are actually, that some of them are really well intentioned and good people. And I think Tom Homan might be one of those people. And how do you get your voice out? How can you actually be heard on the right in a big way outside of the Flynn Network, or somebody, whether it's Steve Bannon or somebody on these networks? It's very difficult. Either somehow go straight to Fox News, or you go through the established channels, and it's very difficult. And that's something that they have created. One last comment, and Farm Girl says a lot of these agencies are running themselves without government oversight, including Office of President. Seems like, yep, I think that's true. There's just, it's a lot of chaos, and it needs to be brought into order. And there needs, we need to see, we need some serious accountability, and we need some serious investigations. And the investigation that Kash Patel did on Crossfire Hurricane, the bottom line is, I don't think that it was anywhere near the type of investigation that we need on the FBI now. And that was just a small thing. And the investigation into the FBI is so much bigger than that. And in my view, he completely failed on that investigation. So I just don't see how he can, how he could possibly make the FBI into something that's good. and especially when he's out and, somebody that just criticizes him on MSNBC and he engages in lawfare against him. I mean, do we want somebody that's that retaliatory in charge of the FBI? This attorney, Jesse Banal, has actually followed my Substack, undoubtedly to look for some reason to engage in lawfare against me. I personally don't want somebody like that in the FBI. I don't think that's what we want. We don't want an FBI that's going to be looking at us, as criminals, looking for, show me the man, show me the crime. That's not what we want. That's what we've had. We don't want it just to be the same thing, but going against the people that we don't like on the other side. No, we don't want that. We want a just situation. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate you. I enjoyed the show a lot. And thank you for all your comments and questions. And it's all really valuable. And the last thing I want to do is tell you what to think. I just want to share the evidence with you that's led me to the conclusions that I've come to, and encourage you to come to your own conclusions and do your own research and share that with me. And, this is how we all kind of grow and move towards the bigger truth that's bigger than what any of us can see and even comprehend on our own. So there we are. It's been great. And we will see you on Monday. On tomorrow, I hold my members only podcast. Again, you can go biggertruthmedia.com is my Substack. You can join there for $5 a month. And by doing so, you get access to my exclusive members only content, which includes occasional shows on Tuesdays and Fridays. So I will be doing a members only Q&A podcast, and I'll have some new information to share tomorrow as well for my paid subscribers. So you can join there today, and you will see how to get involved. So thank you very much.